Marcus Sterling's phone slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. On the screen, 3 empty wheelchairs sat abandoned in his living room. His paralyzed triplets, the boys doctors swore would never stand, were walking. Step by trembling step, they moved toward the outstretched arms of the black maid he'd hired to watch, not to heal. His back hit the wall. His legs gave out. The billionaire, who'd built an empire on cold logic, watched his entire world collapse and rebuild itself in 11 seconds of security footage. But this wasn't the miracle. This was the result of something far more dangerous. Something that started 6 weeks ago when a stranger walked into his mansion and refused to accept the word impossible. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. The security notification buzzed at 2:47 a.m. Marcus Sterling sat up in bed, heart-pounding hand, already reaching for his phone on the nightstand. 6 weeks of watching. 6 weeks of waiting for the betrayal he knew was coming. Camera 7. Therapy room. Motion detected. He swiped the screen and held his breath. The night vision feed showed Loretta Mae Johnson kneeling beside Micah's medical bed. The smallest of his triplets lay still, eyes closed, chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of sleep. Loretta's hand rested on his tiny chest. Her lips were moving. Marcus turned up the volume. "And weeping may endure for a night." Her voice came through soft and clear, "but joy cometh in the morning." She wasn't stealing. She wasn't photographing. She wasn't doing anything the 11 caregivers before her had done. She was praying over his son at 3 in the morning. Marcus watched for 17 minutes. Loretta moved to Isaiah's bed, then Nathan's, repeating the same prayer, the same gentle touch, the same whispered words he couldn't fully make out. When she finally settled into the chair between their beds, she didn't pull out a phone. She didn't close her eyes. She just sat there, watching his sons sleep like they were the most precious things in the world. Marcus set his phone down and stared at the ceiling. Who was this woman? 6 weeks earlier, Marcus had fired caregiver number 11. Her name was Patricia. She'd come with glowing recommendations, 15 years of experience, a smile that seemed genuine. She lasted 3 months longer than most. Then Marcus reviewed the footage and found her on the phone with a tabloid reporter. 3 of them, yeah? All paralyzed. The father never comes out of his office. It's sad, really. You should see how much equipment he's got in here. Must have spent millions. The settlement cost him $400,000. The NDA cost another $100. The damage to his son's privacy, that was priceless. Marcus sat in his office that night, bourbon in hand, scrolling through 11 files. 11 failures, 11 betrayals, 11 reasons to never trust anyone again. His lawyer called it paranoia. His therapist called it trauma response. Marcus called it survival. Mr. Sterling. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. The agency sent over a new candidate. She's waiting in the study. Marcus didn't move. Tell her to leave her resume and go. Sir, she's already been through 3 rounds of screening. Background check came back clean. No social media presence. No family connections to media. I said tell her to go. Silence on the other end. Then, she says she'll wait. Marcus laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Let her wait then. I've got all night. 3 hours later, Marcus walked into the study expecting to find an empty room. Loretta Mae Johnson sat in the leather chair by the window, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the door like she'd been counting the seconds until he arrived. She stood when he entered, not quickly, deliberately. Her posture was straight, her gaze steady. She wore simple clothes, navy blue scrubs, white sneakers, a small gold cross at her throat. Mr. Sterling. You're still here. You're still hurting. The words landed like a slap. Marcus stopped mid-stride. Excuse me. Loretta didn't flinch. I read about your wife, about your boys. I know what you've been through. And I know why you've been through 11 caregivers in 18 months. You don't know anything about me. I know you're scared. Her voice was calm, certain. I know you've built walls so high you can't see over them anymore. And I know those 3 little boys down the hall need someone who won't give up on them." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. The doctors have already given up. The specialists have given up. What makes you think you're any different? Loretta took a step toward him. "Because I don't believe in giving up, Mr. Sterling. Not on children. Not ever." Something flickered in her eyes, pain maybe. Old pain. The kind that never fully heals. Marcus should have thrown her out. Should have called security, had her escorted off the property, added her name to the list of people who'd tried and failed. Instead, he heard himself say, "You have 1 month. Break any rule and you're gone." Loretta nodded. "What are the rules?" "No improvising, no experimental treatments, no bonding. Follow the medical protocol exactly. These boys have been through enough disappointment." "And you, Mr. Sterling, have you been through enough?" Marcus turned away. "Start tomorrow, 7 a.m. Don't be late." He walked out without looking back. The first week was unremarkable. Marcus watched through his cameras as Loretta followed every instruction to the letter. She arrived at 7, fed the boys their prescribed meals, administered their medications on schedule, performed the exact stretches the physical therapist had outlined. Nothing more, nothing less. Marcus told himself this was good. This was what he wanted. A professional who understood boundaries. But something nagged at him. Something in the way she looked at his sons when she thought no one was watching. The way her hand lingered on Nathan's cheek after wiping his mouth. The way she hummed under her breath. Old songs, spirituals, melodies Marcus didn't recognize. On day 8, he noticed the first deviation. Loretta had finished the morning routine and was supposed to transfer the boys to the sunroom for their UV therapy session. Instead, she wheeled all 3 of them to the window and stopped. Marcus leaned toward his monitor. "Look at that," Loretta said softly, pointing outside. "See those birds? That's a cardinal. Red like a fire truck. You see him, Nathan?" Nathan didn't respond. He never responded. His eyes stared at the same spot they always stared, somewhere beyond the window, beyond the world. But Loretta kept talking. "And that one there, that's a blue jay. Loud and bossy, just like my grandmother used to be." She laughed quietly. She'd sit on her porch every morning counting birds, making up stories about where they were going. Marcus reached for the intercom button. This wasn't protocol. This was exactly what he'd told her not to do. But his finger hovered over the button and didn't press. "Your mama would have loved this view," Loretta continued. "I can feel it. She's here, you know, watching over you. Always." Marcus's hand dropped to his lap. He watched Loretta talk to his sons for 45 minutes. About birds, about weather, about nothing important at all. And when she finally wheeled them to the sunroom, Nathan's head was turned slightly, just a fraction of a degree, toward the window. Marcus rewound the footage and watched it again. Day 12. Loretta broke another rule. Marcus caught her on the therapy room camera, sitting on the floor with Isaiah. She had his small legs in her hands and was moving them in a pattern, left, right, like a walking motion. This wasn't in any protocol. No specialist had prescribed this. He grabbed his phone and dialed her number. "What are you doing?" On the screen, he watched her look up at the camera directly into his eyes. "Motor pattern training." "That's not—" "I know it's not in the binder, Mr. Sterling, but the binder isn't working." The binder was written by doctors. The binder was written by doctors who've never sat on this floor with your son. Her voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath. "I'm not hurting him. I'm reminding his brain what his legs are supposed to do." "You're not qualified." "You're right. I don't have fancy degrees. I don't have published papers. What I have is 23 years of caring for children the world gave up on." She paused. "What I have is a brother who died because nobody believed he could be more than his diagnosis." Marcus went silent. "His name was Samuel." Loretta continued, her voice dropping. "Cerebral palsy, same as your boys. Doctors told my mama he'd never walk, never talk, never be nothing but a burden. She believed them. We all believed them. And Samuel." Her voice cracked. Samuel believed it too. Stopped trying. Stopped hoping. Died at 7 years old with a broken spirit. Marcus couldn't speak. I made a promise at his grave, Mr. Sterling. I promised I'd never let another child feel that kind of alone. I'd never let another child die without someone believing in them. The line hummed with silence. I'm not asking you to trust me, Loretta said finally. I'm asking you to let me try. Marcus watched her on the screen. This stranger, this woman who'd walked into his fortress and spoken more truth in 2 weeks than anyone had in 2 years. One more chance, he said. That's all you get. That's all I need. She hung up and went back to moving Isaiah's legs. Left, right, like a prayer set to motion. Week 3. Everything changed. It started small. Nathan smiled during Loretta's morning songs. Not a big smile, just a flicker at the corner of his mouth. Isaiah's fingers twitched when she played music from a small speaker she'd brought from home. But Micah, the smallest, the weakest, the one doctors said had the worst prognosis. Micah held his head up. For 14 seconds he held his head up and looked at Loretta like he was seeing her for the first time. Marcus watched the footage 17 times that night. The licensed physical therapist came on Thursday. Dr. Sironde Patterson she'd been visiting for 18 months, documenting the boy's lack of progress with clinical precision. This time was different. Marcus watched through the camera as she examined Nathan first. Her hands moved over his arms, his legs testing muscle tone and reflexes. She stopped, repeated the examination, stopped again. Who's been working with him? She asked Loretta. Just me following your protocols. Dr. Patterson shook her head. This isn't from my protocols. His muscle tone has improved significantly. See this? She lifted Nathan's arm, let it fall. There's resistance now. There wasn't resistance 3 weeks ago. She moved to Isaiah. Same result. Then Micah. I don't understand, Dr. Patterson said, flipping through her notes. I've been coming here for over a year. Nothing changed. Now suddenly... Sometimes change takes time, Loretta said quietly. Dr. Patterson looked at her for a long moment. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I'll adjust the official protocol to include your methods. She left an hour later. At the door, she paused and looked back at the boys, then at Loretta. I've seen a lot of cases like this, she said. Most of them end the same way: managed decline, comfortable stagnation. She paused. This is the first time in years I've seen progress. The door closed behind her. Loretta sat down between the 3 wheelchairs and began to cry. That night, Marcus did something he hadn't done in 2 years. He researched neuroplasticity in pediatric cerebral palsy patients, early intervention outcomes, case studies of children who exceeded their prognosis, page after page, article after article, medical journals from Stanford, Johns Hopkins Mayo Clinic. The evidence was overwhelming. The infant brain could rewire itself. Repetitive motor patterns could build new neural pathways. Early consistent intervention could achieve outcomes that initial diagnoses deemed impossible. Everything Loretta had told him, it was all documented, all proven, all right there waiting to be found, and he'd never looked. Marcus pushed back from his desk and walked to the window. The garden below sat dark, neglected. The fountain in the center hadn't run since Diane died. For 2 years he'd poured millions into maintaining his son's limitations. State-of-the-art wheelchairs, custom medical beds, equipment designed to make their imprisonment comfortable. But he'd never fought for more. He'd accepted the doctor's verdict like a death sentence built walls around his heart, and watched his sons through screens because watching through screens meant he couldn't lose them again. If he kept his distance, the losing wouldn't hurt as much. But Loretta, a stranger making $15 an hour, had walked into his home and done what his millions couldn't, not because she had better resources, because she had something he'd buried the day Diane's hand went cold in his. faith. Marcus pressed his forehead against the glass. Somewhere in this house, in a yellow nursery, Diane had painted herself 3 cribs, still sat in a half-circle. Elephants and giraffes still danced across the walls, and a rocking chair still waited for a mother who would never come home. He'd locked that door the day of the funeral. Hadn't opened it since. Marcus walked down the hallway, past his office, past the therapy room where his son slept, past the photos he'd removed because seeing Diane smile 20 times a day was too much to bear. The nursery door stood at the end of the corridor. Dust had gathered on the handle. He wrapped his fingers around it. Cold metal. 18 months of avoiding this moment. The door opened with a soft creak. Moonlight spilled through the window, illuminating the room exactly as Diane had left it. The pale yellow walls. The mural she'd spent 2 months perfecting. The 3 cribs arranged so the boys could see each other when they woke. A folded blanket still lay across the rocking chair. She'd set it there the morning they left for the hospital. "Just in case the nursery gets cold while we're gone," she'd said, laughing. "I want everything perfect for when we bring them home." Marcus sank into the chair. The blanket still smelled like her, lavender and vanilla, the lotion she used every night before bed. He pressed it against his face and wept. For Diane. For his sons. For 2 years of running from a grief that had finally caught up with him. "I'm sorry," he whispered into the darkness. "I stopped believing. I stopped fighting. I let fear win." The house answered with silence. But somewhere down the hall, so faint he almost missed it, Marcus heard humming. An old spiritual, soft and steady. Loretta was still awake, still watching over his sons, still believing when he couldn't. Marcus stayed in that rocking chair until dawn broke over the Connecticut hills. When he finally stood, something had shifted inside him, something buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. Not hope, not yet, but the possibility of hope. And sometimes that's enough to start. Marcus didn't fire Loretta that night, or the next, or the night after that. Instead, he did something he'd sworn never to do again. He started to trust. The next morning, Marcus did something he hadn't done in 18 months. He left his office before noon. His feet carried him down the hallway toward the therapy room, past the empty frames on the walls, past the silence he'd built like a fortress. Each step felt heavier than the last, like his body was fighting against a current that had pulled him backward for 2 years. He stopped outside the door. Through the crack he could hear Loretta's voice. "That's it, baby. Feel that? That's your leg moving. That's you doing that, not me." Marcus pressed his palm against the wall. His heart was pounding. When was the last time he'd stood this close to his sons without a screen between them? He couldn't remember. The door opened. Loretta stood there. Isaiah cradled against her shoulder. She didn't look surprised to see him. "Mr. Sterling?" The words stuck in his throat. "I wanted to see them." Loretta stepped aside without a word. Marcus walked into the room. Nathan sat in his blue wheelchair by the window, eyes fixed on something outside. Micah lay in his medical bed, small chest rising and falling in sleep. And Isaiah turned his head when Marcus entered. Their eyes met. Marcus felt his knees go weak. His son was looking at him. Not through him, not past him. At him. "He's been more alert today," Loretta said softly. "Started tracking movement about an hour ago." Marcus moved closer. His hand trembled as he reached toward Isaiah's face. When his fingers touched his son's cheek, Isaiah didn't flinch, didn't look away. "Hey, buddy," Marcus whispered. "Hey." Isaiah's fingers twitched against Marcus's wrist. Something broke open inside Marcus's chest, a dam he'd spent 2 years building brick by brick to hold back everything that might drown him. "He knows you," Loretta said. "They all do. They've been waiting for their daddy to come back." Marcus couldn't speak. He just stood there, his hand on his son's face, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I'm here," he finally managed. "I'm here now." Loretta watched him for a long moment. Then she smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. That's all they needed to hear. The following days blurred together in a way Marcus hadn't experienced since before Diane died. He started spending mornings in the therapy room instead of his office. At first, he just sat in the corner watching Loretta work. She didn't seem to mind his presence, didn't acknowledge it much either. She just continued her routine, the songs, the motor patterns, the whispered prayers that had once made him reach for the intercom button. "You can help, you know," she said on the third day. Marcus looked up from his phone. "What?" "I said you can help." Loretta gestured toward Nathan. "Come hold his hands while I work his legs." "I don't know how." "Ain't nothing to know. Just hold him. Let him feel you there." Marcus set his phone down and crossed the room. He knelt beside Nathan's wheelchair and took his son's hands in his own. They were so small, so fragile, he'd forgotten how small they were. "Now just talk to him," Loretta said, beginning the leg movements. "Don't matter what you say, just let him hear your voice." Marcus's mind went blank. What did you say to a child you'd been hiding from for 2 years? He swallowed hard. "I used to read to you, when you were in the NICU. The doctors said you couldn't hear me, but I read anyway. Your mom picked out the books." She had a whole list. Loretta kept moving Nathan's legs. Left, right, left, right. "She wanted to read Charlotte's Web first," Marcus continued. "Said it was about friendship and sacrifice and all the things that matter." His voice cracked. "I never finished it. After she was gone, I couldn't." Nathan's fingers curled around Marcus's thumb. "She loved you so much," Marcus whispered. "All 3 of you. She fought so hard to bring you into this world." Loretta glanced up at him. Her eyes were wet. "Keep going," she said quietly. "He's listening." Marcus talked for an hour, about Diane, about the nursery she'd painted, about the dreams they'd had for their boys. He told Nathan about the house they'd bought, the garden his mother had wanted to plant, the fountain that hadn't run since the day everything fell apart. By the time he finished, his voice was hoarse and his face was streaked with tears. But Nathan's grip on his thumb hadn't loosened. "That was good," Loretta said. "Real good." Marcus looked at her. "How do you do this?" "Do what?" "Believe, after everything you've been through, after your brother." He shook his head. "How do you still believe?" Loretta set Nathan's legs down gently and sat back on her heels. "Because giving up is a choice, Mr. Sterling. And every day I wake up, I choose not to make it. But what if it doesn't work? What if all of this, the exercises, the prayers, everything, what if it doesn't change anything?" Loretta looked at him with those steady eyes. "Then at least they'll know somebody tried. At least they'll know somebody loved them enough to fight." She paused. "That's more than a lot of children get." Marcus thought about his own father. Cold, distant, a man who measured love in quarterly reports and stock portfolios. He'd never held Marcus's hand. Never talked to him about anything that mattered. "My father never fought for me," Marcus said slowly. "I don't know if I know how. You're here, aren't you?" Loretta stood and brushed off her knees. "That's fighting. That's a start." Week 4 brought the first real test. Marcus was in the therapy room helping Loretta with Micah's afternoon exercises when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and felt his stomach drop. Dr. Harrison, the neurologist who delivered the original diagnosis. "I need to take this," Marcus said. He stepped into the hallway and answered. "Mr. Sterling, I'm calling about your son's 6-month evaluation. We need to schedule a comprehensive assessment." Marcus gripped the phone tighter. "Assessment for what?" "Standard protocol. We need to document their developmental status and discuss long-term care options." A pause. "I've also been reviewing your insurance claims. I see you've been employing a new caregiver without consulting our recommended care team." Loretta is qualified. Loretta Mae Johnson holds no certifications in pediatric neurology or physical therapy. Whatever she's doing is outside established medical guidelines. She's making progress, real progress. Dr. Harrison sighed. Mr. Sterling, I understand the desire to believe, but I've seen hundreds of cases like your son's. False hope can be more damaging than accepting reality. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest. Reality? You mean the reality where my sons sit in wheelchairs for the rest of their lives? The reality where I write checks to specialists who've done nothing but confirm what you told me 2 years ago? I'm trying to protect your family. No, you're trying to protect your diagnosis. Marcus's voice hardened. I'll schedule the evaluation, but I'm not stopping Loretta's work. He hung up before Dr. Harrison could respond. When he walked back into the therapy room, Loretta was watching him. Trouble. Marcus shook his head. Nothing I can't handle. But that night, alone in his office, he pulled up the evaluation paperwork and stared at it for 3 hours. Every form, every checkbox, every clinical term reminded him of the day those same doctors had looked at him with practiced sympathy and said the words that had broken him. Highly unlikely, possibly never. What if they were right? What if all of this, the progress, the hope, Loretta's prayers, what if it was just a cruel trick, a temporary illusion before reality came crashing back? Marcus opened his desk drawer and pulled out Diane's photo. 8 months pregnant, glowing, looking at him like he could fix anything. I don't know what to do, he whispered. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. The photo didn't answer, but somewhere in the house, he heard Loretta's voice, soft, distant, singing one of her spirituals. Trouble don't last always. Marcus set the photo down and made a decision. He would fight. Even if he didn't know how. Even if he failed, he would fight. The evaluation came 2 weeks later. Dr. Harrison arrived with a team of 3 specialists. They set up in the therapy room, arranging equipment, reviewing charts, preparing the tests that would determine his son's futures. Loretta stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching with an expression Marcus couldn't read. We'll start with Nathan, Dr. Harrison said. Standard motor function assessment. Marcus watched as they positioned his eldest son on the examination table. Nathan's eyes darted around the room, landing briefly on Marcus, then on Loretta. It's okay, buddy, Marcus said. I'm right here. Dr. Harrison began the examination. He lifted Nathan's arms, tested his reflexes, documented every response with clinical precision. But something was different. Dr. Harrison frowned. He repeated a test, then another. This isn't right, he muttered. What? Marcus stepped forward. What's wrong? Dr. Harrison looked up at him. His muscle tone has improved significantly since our last evaluation. His reflexes are more responsive. His head control is... He trailed off, shaking his head. Is that bad? No, it's just... Dr. Harrison glanced at Loretta. It's unexpected. They moved to Isaiah. Same results. Then Micah. By the time the evaluation was complete, Dr. Harrison's clinical detachment had cracked. He sat in the corner reviewing his notes while his team packed up equipment in confused silence. I don't understand, he said finally. These results don't match any projected trajectory. The improvement across all 3 subjects is miraculous, Loretta suggested. Dr. Harrison shot her a look. Statistically anomalous. Call it what you want, Loretta said. Those boys are getting stronger. That's not a statistic. That's a fact. Dr. Harrison stood and faced Marcus. I want to be clear, Mr. Sterling. This doesn't change the underlying diagnosis. Cerebral palsy doesn't reverse itself. Whatever improvements you're seeing may plateau or regress. But they're improvements, Marcus said. Yes, they're improvements. Dr. Harrison gathered his things. I'll recommend continued monitoring, but I'd suggest tempering your expectations. He left without another word. Marcus stood in the doorway watching the team load their equipment into black SUVs. When he turned around, Loretta was smiling. Told you, she said. You told me to believe. Same thing. That night, Marcus made another decision. He found Loretta in the kitchen washing dishes after the boys' evening feeding. She didn't turn when he entered. "I want to give you a raise," Marcus said. "Don't need a raise. You deserve one. What I'm doing isn't about money, Mr. Sterling." She set a plate in the drying rack and turned to face him. "I told you why I'm here. It isn't going to change based on what you pay me." Marcus leaned against the counter. "Then what do you need?" Loretta dried her hands on a towel and considered the question. "I need you to stop watching through cameras." Marcus went still. "I know you do it," she continued. "Every night you're up there reviewing footage, looking for something wrong, waiting for me to fail like the others did." She stepped closer. "I'm not going to fail those boys. But I need you to trust that. Really trust it. Trust hasn't worked out well for me." "I know. But those boys need a father, not a security guard." Her voice softened. "They need you in the room with them, holding them, talking to them, not watching from some screen like they're a problem to be monitored." Marcus felt the words land like blows. Because she was right. Every part of it. "I don't know how to be what they need," he admitted. "I don't know how to be a father without her." Nobody knows how to be a parent until they start being one. Diane isn't here to teach you, but those boys are. They'll show you what they need if you let them. Marcus looked at her, this woman who'd walked into his broken life and started piecing it back together without asking permission. "Why do you care so much?" he asked. "About my sons, about any of this?" Loretta's expression changed. Something old surfaced in her eyes. Grief, maybe, or guilt. "Because I couldn't save Samuel," she said quietly. "Because I spent 30 years carrying that weight, wondering what would have happened if I'd fought harder, believed more, refused to let the world tell me what my brother couldn't do." She blinked back tears. "When I walk into that room and see your boys, I see him. I see every child who was written off before they had a chance to prove what they were capable of. And I swore on his grave that I would never stop fighting." She met his eyes. "Not for money, not for recognition. Because it's the only way I know how to make his death mean something." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. They were both running from grief. Both trying to outpace the guilt that haunted their worst moments. "I'll try," Marcus said finally. "I'll try to trust you." Loretta nodded slowly. "That's all I'm asking." She went back to washing dishes. Marcus watched her for a moment, then walked out. That night, for the first time in 2 years, he didn't turn on the security monitors. The next morning, Marcus showed up in the therapy room before Loretta arrived. He stood between the 3 wheelchairs, looking at his sons in the soft early light. Nathan was awake, eyes tracking something only he could see. Isaiah's hand rested on his tray, fingers curled around the edge of a blanket. Micah slept as he usually did, chest rising and falling with peaceful rhythm. "Good morning," Marcus said softly. None of them responded. But he didn't expect them to. He knelt beside Nathan's chair and took his hand. "Your mom used to sing to you," Marcus said. "Every night before she went to bed, she'd stand in the nursery and sing. She had a terrible voice, couldn't carry a tune to save her life, but she didn't care. She said you could hear her anyway." Nathan's fingers twitched. "I don't remember the words," Marcus continued. "I wish I did, but I remember the melody. It was something her mother used to sing to her." He started to hum. Off-key, hesitant, the melody rough from disuse, but he kept going. The door opened. Loretta stepped inside and froze. Marcus didn't stop. He kept humming, kept holding Nathan's hand, kept his eyes fixed on his son's face. When the melody finally trailed off, Loretta was standing beside him. "That was beautiful," she said quietly. "It was terrible." "Doesn't matter. He heard you." She placed her hand on Marcus's shoulder. "That's what matters." Marcus stood slowly. His eyes were wet. "I want to help today," he said. "Really help. Not just sit in the corner." Loretta smiled that same warm smile she'd shown him weeks ago when he'd first touched Isaiah's face. "Then let's get started." They worked together all morning. Loretta showed him the motor patterns, how to hold Micah's legs, how to guide them through the walking motions, how to feel for the subtle resistance that meant his muscles were engaging. "Don't force it," she instructed. "Just guide. Let him do the work." Marcus moved his son's legs. Left, right. Left, right. "Like this?" "Exactly like that. You're a natural." "I don't feel natural." "Nobody does at first, but you're here. That's what counts." They moved to Nathan, then Isaiah. By lunch, Marcus's arms ached from the repetitive movements, but something inside him felt lighter than it had in years. "Can I ask you something?" he said while Loretta prepared the boys' midday feeding. "Always. When did you know that they could do more than the doctor said?" Loretta considered the question while she mixed formula. "The first week," she said finally. "I was sitting with Micah, just talking to him the way I always do, and I felt him squeeze my finger. It wasn't random muscle movement. It was intentional." She looked at Marcus. He was trying to communicate. The doctors would say, "I know what the doctors would say. I've heard it 100 times." She set down the formula and faced him fully. "But doctors see statistics, charts, data points. They don't sit on the floor with a child at 3 in the morning and feel that child reaching for something more." "How do you know the difference?" Loretta smiled. "You just know. The same way you knew Diane was the one you wanted to marry. The same way you knew something was wrong when she was in labor." She paused. "Some things can't be measured. They can only be felt." Marcus thought about that night in the hospital. The moment Diane's grip had weakened, the cold certainty that had settled in his chest before any monitor started alarming. He'd known, even before the doctors did. "I think I understand," he said quietly. "Then you're ready." "Ready for what?" Loretta handed him a bottle of formula. "Ready to feed your son." Marcus took the bottle. His hands were shaking. "What if I do it wrong?" "Then you'll learn and do it better next time." She guided him toward Isaiah's wheelchair. "That's all any of us can do." Marcus sat down and lifted the bottle to his son's lips. Isaiah's mouth opened slightly, accepting the nipple with a trust that made Marcus's heart ache. "That's it," Loretta said softly. "Just like that." Marcus fed his son for the first time in over a year. The formula went down slowly, but it went down. And when Isaiah's eyes met his, really met his, Marcus felt something he'd thought was dead forever. Connection. He was a father again. The weeks that followed changed everything. Marcus stopped hiding in his office. He stopped watching through cameras. He started each morning in the therapy room, with Loretta learning her methods, absorbing her faith, letting her steady presence fill the holes that grief had carved in him. The boys responded. Nathan started turning his head toward sounds. Isaiah's fingers grew stronger, more coordinated. Micah, the smallest, the weakest, began holding his head up for longer and longer periods. "You see that?" Loretta said one afternoon, pointing at Micah. "That's 30 seconds. 30 seconds of independent head control." Marcus watched his son's small face, concentrated and determined. "He's fighting," Marcus said. "They all are. They've been fighting since the day they were born." Loretta looked at him. "Now they've got their daddy fighting with them." That night, Marcus didn't go to his office after the boys fell asleep. Instead, he sat in his rocking chair in the old nursery, the one Diane had designed, the one he'd avoided for 2 years. The yellow walls still glowed in the moonlight. The elephants and giraffes still danced across their mural. And for the first time, the room didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like a promise. "I'm trying," Marcus whispered into the darkness. "I'm finally trying." Somewhere in the house, Loretta's voice drifted up from the therapy room. Another spiritual, another prayer. And Marcus, for the first time since Diane died, felt hope. Real hope. The kind that costs everything. But he was ready to pay. 5 weeks in, and Marcus had started to believe. That was his first mistake. He arrived at the therapy room that Tuesday morning with coffee in hand and something unfamiliar on his face, a smile. Loretta was already there, working with Nathan on his arm exercises, her voice soft as she guided his movements. "Look at you, baby. You're getting so strong." Marcus set his coffee on the shelf and knelt beside Isaiah's wheelchair. "Morning, buddy. Ready to work?" Isaiah's eyes tracked toward his voice. His fingers twitched against the armrest. "I'll take that as a yes." They fell into their routine, Marcus handling the motor pattern exercises while Loretta worked on fine motor skills. The room filled with quiet conversation, gentle encouragement, and the occasional hum of one of Loretta's spirituals. It felt almost normal, almost like a family. Then Marcus's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and felt his stomach drop. Dr. Harrison. Again. "I need to take this," he said, stepping toward the door. "Everything okay?" Loretta asked without looking up. "Probably nothing." But the tightness in his chest said otherwise. Marcus walked into the hallway and answered. "Dr. Harrison." "Mr. Sterling, I've reviewed the results from last week's evaluation with my colleagues. We need to talk." "I thought the results were positive." "They were. That's the problem." A pause. "I've consulted with 3 other neurologists. None of us can explain the rate of improvement your sons are showing. It doesn't align with any documented progression of cerebral palsy cases." Marcus leaned against the wall. "You're saying my sons are getting better, and that's a problem. I'm saying the improvements are statistically improbable, which raises questions about methodology." Another pause. "I need to know exactly what your caregiver is doing." "She's following her own program, motor pattern training sensory stimulation. Motor pattern training isn't proven to produce these kinds of results, not in cases this severe. And yet my sons are improving. That's what concerns me." Dr. Harrison's voice hardened. "Mr. Sterling, I've been practicing for 30 years. I've seen parents chase miracles before. They mortgage houses, drain savings, follow unproven treatments down rabbit holes that lead nowhere. This isn't, and I've seen what happens when those miracles don't materialize. The crash is devastating, for the parents and for the children who sense they've somehow failed to meet expectations." Marcus felt anger flare in his chest. "You think I'm chasing a miracle?" "I think you're a grieving man who's desperate for hope. And I think this caregiver, however well-intentioned, may be giving you false expectations. You haven't seen her work." "I don't need to. The science is clear. Cerebral palsy doesn't reverse. At best, we manage symptoms and optimize quality of life." "At best?" Marcus's voice rose. "That's what you told me 2 years ago. At best, manage, optimize. Those are words for people who've given up. Those are words for people who understand the condition. Do you? Do you really understand what it's like to be told your sons will never walk, never talk, never be anything more than a burden? Do you understand what it's like to bury that hope and then have someone come along and dig it back up?" Silence on the other end. "I'm requesting a formal review of your caregiver's methods," Dr. Harrison said finally. "I'll need full documentation of her program and access to observe her sessions. And if I refuse, then I'll have to report my concerns to the appropriate licensing boards. Ms. Johnson isn't certified to provide the type of intervention she's claiming to offer. If she's practicing outside her scope, that's a legal matter." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "You'd really do that? You'd go after a woman who's helping my sons?" "I'd protect your sons from unproven treatments that could ultimately harm them. That's my job." The line went dead. Marcus stood in the hallway, phone pressed against his forehead, trying to breathe through the rage building in his chest. He walked back into the therapy room. Loretta looked up immediately, reading something in his expression. "What happened?" "Dr. Harrison wants to review your methods. Formally." Loretta's hands stilled on Nathan's arm. "Review how?" "Documentation, observation, He's threatening to report you to licensing boards if I don't cooperate." Something flickered across her face. Not fear, something older, more weary. "Let him." Marcus stared at her. "What?" "Let him come. Let him observe. Let him document whatever he wants." She resumed Nathan's exercise, her movements steady despite her words. "Truth doesn't hide from scrutiny. He could shut you down. He could have you removed." "Mr. Sterling." Loretta stopped and looked at him directly. "I've been doing this work for 23 years. I've faced doctors like Harrison before, men who see disability as a sentence to be managed, not a challenge to be fought. This is different. He has power. Power to do what? Stop me from believing in your sons." She shook her head. "Nobody has that power. Not him. Not any licensing board. Not anyone." Marcus felt something crack inside him. The fear he'd been holding back, the doubt that had never fully disappeared, it came rushing to the surface. What if he's right? The words came out before he could stop them. What if we're seeing what we want to see? What if all of this is just wishful thinking? Loretta set Nathan's arm down gently and stood. She walked to Marcus and took his hands in hers. "Look at me." He met her eyes. "I've buried a brother who died because no one believed in him. I've spent 3 decades carrying that guilt, wondering what would have happened if I'd fought harder. And in 23 years of this work, I've learned one thing." She squeezed his hands. "Children know when you believe in them. They feel it in their bones, and they rise to meet it. But the science told you your sons would never improve. The science was wrong." Her voice softened. "Sometimes miracles don't fit in data sets, Mr. Sterling. Sometimes they just happen because someone refused to accept impossible." Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes. "I'm scared. I know. I can't lose them. Not after everything." "You won't lose them. They're right here, fighting every day, getting stronger every day." She released his hands and gestured toward the 3 wheelchairs. "That's not wishful thinking. That's real." Marcus looked at his sons. Nathan, with his head turned toward the window. Isaiah, fingers curling around a toy Loretta had placed in his lap. Micah, eyes open and tracking something alive in his gaze that hadn't been there 6 weeks ago. They were improving. He could see it. He could feel it. "But Dr." Harrison's words echoed in his mind. "False expectations. The crash is devastating." "What do we do?" Marcus asked quietly. Loretta smiled. "We keep going. We let him come and observe. We show him what these boys are capable of." She paused. "And we trust that truth is stronger than fear." Marcus nodded slowly. "Okay. Okay. Tell Dr. Harrison he can come whenever he wants. I'm done hiding." Loretta's smile widened. "Now that's the father those boys need." Dr. Harrison arrived 3 days later with 2 colleagues and an array of monitoring equipment. Marcus met them at the door. His hands were steady, but his heart was racing. "Dr. Harrison?" "Mr. Sterling?" The neurologist's expression was clinical, detached. "These are Dr. Patel and Dr. Moreno. They'll be assisting with the observation. The therapy room is ready." They walked down the hallway in tense silence. Marcus could feel their skepticism like a physical weight pressing against his back with every step. Loretta was waiting inside, positioned between the 3 wheelchairs, like a general before battle. She'd dressed more formally than usual, pressed slacks, a clean white blouse, but her eyes held the same steady fire Marcus had come to recognize. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Loretta Johnson." Dr. Harrison barely glanced at her. "Ms. Johnson, we'll need you to demonstrate your methods while we observe and document." "Of course. Where would you like me to start?" "Motor pattern training. I believe that's what you call it?" Something flickered in Loretta's expression, a flash of steel quickly hidden. "That's one component. We can begin there." She knelt beside Micah's wheelchair and lifted his small legs into position. The doctors arranged themselves around the room, tablets ready, eyes sharp. The concept is simple. Loretta began moving Micah's legs in the familiar pattern. Repetitive motor stimulation can help build new neural pathways even in cases of significant brain injury. Left, right, left, right. We're teaching his brain to remember what his legs are supposed to do. This isn't a recognized treatment protocol, Dr. Moreno said, tapping notes into her tablet. No, it isn't. Most recognized protocols focus on managing limitations rather than pushing past them. For good reason, Dr. Harrison interjected. Documented evidence. Documented evidence told Mr. Sterling his sons would never improve. Is that still your position? Silence. Loretta continued the leg movements, her voice calm and steady. I'm not claiming miracles. I'm claiming consistent patient intervention that gives these children a chance to show what they're capable of. And what results have you observed? Dr. Patel asked, his tone more curious than skeptical. Improved muscle tone across all 3 children. Increased head control, particularly in Micah. Enhanced tracking and response to stimuli. Loretta glanced at Marcus. Perhaps Mr. Sterling can speak to the changes he's witnessed. All eyes turned to him. Marcus stepped forward. 6 weeks ago, my sons were exactly where they'd been for 2 years. No improvement, no response, nothing. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Since Loretta started, I've seen things I was told were impossible. Nathan turns his head toward sounds. Isaiah grasps objects intentionally. And Micah... His voice caught. Micah held his head up for 45 seconds yesterday, on his own. Anecdotal observations aren't, Dr. Harrison began. I have footage, Marcus cut in. Every day, time-stamped, documented. Weeks of evidence showing progressive improvement. Footage can be misleading. Then watch her work. Marcus's voice hardened. That's why you're here, isn't it? So watch, observe, document. Do whatever you need to do, but don't dismiss what's happening in this room just because it doesn't fit your models. Dr. Harrison's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Continue, Ms. Johnson. The observation lasted 4 hours. Loretta moved through her entire routine motor patterns, sensory stimulation, music therapy, cognitive exercises. She explained each element, answered every question, demonstrated techniques with patient precision, and the boys responded. Nathan smiled during the music portion. Isaiah successfully grasped a toy placed just beyond his initial reach. Micah held his head steady through 3 different position changes. Marcus watched the doctor's expressions shift throughout the morning. Skepticism gave way to curiosity. Curiosity gave way to something he couldn't quite name. When Loretta finally finished, Dr. Harrison approached her. The children are clearly engaged with your methods, he said carefully. I'll need to review our documentation before making any formal recommendations. Of course. But I will say... He paused, something struggling beneath his clinical facade. I've been practicing for 30 years. I've seen countless cases like this. And I've never... He stopped. Started again. The level of response I witnessed today is unprecedented for children with this severity of diagnosis. Loretta nodded. Unprecedented doesn't mean impossible. No, I suppose it doesn't. Dr. Harrison gathered his colleagues and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back. I'll be in touch with my findings, Mr. Sterling, but I won't be filing any reports with licensing boards. He glanced at Loretta. At least not yet. The door closed behind them. Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. That was terrifying, Loretta supplied. I was going to say intense. She laughed, a warm, genuine sound that filled the room. Same thing. Marcus crossed to her and took her hands. You were incredible. The way you handled them. I just told the truth. Truth doesn't need handling. Still, thank you. Loretta squeezed his hands and released them. Don't thank me yet. The real test is still coming. What do you mean? She looked at the 3 wheelchairs at the boys who had fought so hard through the morning's scrutiny. "They're close, Mr. Sterling. I can feel it. Something's about to break through." Break through how? Loretta smiled that mysterious smile that had first unnerved him, that now felt like the steadiest thing in his world. "You'll see. Just keep believing." The breakthrough came 12 days later. Marcus was in his office catching up on business calls he'd been neglecting when his phone buzzed. Security alert. Therapy room. Motion detected. He almost ignored it. The cameras had become less of an obsession since he'd started spending more time with the boys directly. But something made him check. The feed showed Loretta in the center of the room on her knees, arms stretched wide. The wheelchairs were positioned nearby, but something was wrong. They were empty. Marcus's heart stopped. He scrambled for a wider angle, panic flooding his system. Where were his sons? What had happened? Had there been an emergency? Then he saw them. Nathan, Isaiah, Micah, standing. His 3 paralyzed sons were standing in the middle of the therapy room, legs trembling, arms out for balance, but standing on their own 2 feet. Marcus dropped his phone and ran. He sprinted down the hallway, past the empty frames, past the silence, past 2 years of grief and fear and hiding. His footsteps echoed like gunshots against the marble. He threw open the therapy room door. The scene hit him like a physical blow. Loretta knelt 5 feet from his sons, tears streaming down her face, arms open wide. The boys swayed on their feet, unsteady, shaking, but upright. "Come on, babies," Loretta whispered. "Come to me. You can do it." Nathan moved first. His left foot lifted from the ground an inch, maybe 2. Then came back down. 1 step. Marcus's hand flew to his mouth. Isaiah went next, more cautious, his legs trembling violently but moving. 1 step. 2. And Micah, the smallest, the weakest, the one doctors had given the worst prognosis, Micah lifted his tiny foot and brought it forward. 3 steps. 4. "Oh my God," Marcus breathed. The boys reached Loretta simultaneously. She gathered all 3 into her arms, pulling them against her chest, sobbing openly. "I knew it," she cried. "I knew you could. I knew it." Marcus's legs gave out. He sank to his knees in the doorway, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to do anything but watch as the impossible unfolded before him. His sons could walk. His sons, the boys' doctors said, would spend their lives in wheelchairs, were walking. The sob that escaped him came from somewhere ancient, somewhere he'd locked away the day Diane died. It was grief and joy and terror and hope, all twisted together, ripping through him like a hurricane. Loretta looked up at him through tear-blurred eyes. "Get over here." Marcus crawled across the floor. His body wouldn't cooperate with standing, so he crawled like a child, like a man, relearning how to move through a world that had just changed beyond recognition. He reached them and wrapped his arms around all 4, his sons, this woman who had refused to give up on them. They sat there in a tangle of limbs and tears, the 4 of them, while the empty wheelchairs stood witness against the wall. "How?" Marcus gasped. "How did this happen?" Loretta shook her head, still crying. "I didn't do anything different. We were doing the exercises same as always, and then Nathan he pushed himself up. And when his brothers saw him..." She laughed through her tears. "They followed. Marcus looked at his sons, really looked at them. Nathan's face held an expression he'd never seen before. Pride, maybe, or triumph. Isaiah's fingers gripped Loretta's sleeve like he was afraid she'd disappear. And Micah's eyes, those eyes that had stayed closed for so long, were wide open, fixed on his father's face. "Hey, buddy," Marcus whispered. "Hey." Micah's hand lifted from his lap. It was shaky, uncertain, but it lifted. And it reached toward Marcus's face. The touch was feather light. Tiny fingers against his cheek. Marcus broke completely. He gathered Micah into his arms and wept. For Diane. For the 2 years he'd lost. For the father he should have been. and the father he was finally becoming. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry I stopped believing in you. I'm so sorry." Micah's hand patted his cheek twice, gently, intentionally. And Marcus understood. His sons had forgiven him long ago. They'd been waiting patiently, faithfully for him to find his way back, and now he had. They stayed on that floor for nearly an hour. Loretta eventually helped the boys back into their wheelchairs. Their legs weren't strong enough yet for extended standing. But something had fundamentally changed. The impossible had become possible. Marcus sat against the wall, exhausted in ways he couldn't articulate. His eyes felt raw, his chest ached, but underneath the exhaustion was something new. Peace. "What happens now?" he asked. Loretta settled into a chair across from him. "Now we keep going. Today was a breakthrough, but it's not the finish line. Those boys have a long road ahead of them." But they walked. They took steps. Walking is a marathon, not a sprint. She paused. But yes, they walked. And they'll walk again, and eventually they'll run. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. "Dr. Harrison said it was impossible." "Dr. Harrison was looking at statistics. He wasn't looking at your sons." "What made the difference? Really, what did you do that no one else could?" Loretta considered the question for a long moment. "I believed," she said finally. "Not hoped, not wished, believed. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Hope says, maybe someday. Belief says yes now, and children can feel that difference. They know when someone truly believes in them versus when someone is just going through the motions." Marcus thought about the 11 caregivers before her. The specialists, the therapists, the doctors, all competent, all professional. None of them had believed. "My brother Samuel taught me that," Loretta continued. "The doctors didn't believe he could be more than his diagnosis. My mama didn't believe it. Even I." Her voice caught. "Even I started to doubt, and Samuel felt it. Every hesitation, every lowered expectation, every word left unsaid. He felt all of it. And it broke him. It killed him." Loretta's eyes glistened. Not the cerebral palsy, not the medical complications, the isolation of knowing that no one in his world truly believed he was worth fighting for. The words landed in Marcus's chest like stones. "I was doing the same thing," he said quietly, "to my sons. You were grieving, you were protecting yourself. It's what humans do when we're broken. It's not an excuse. No, but it's a reason." Loretta leaned forward. "The question isn't what you did before. The question is what you do now." Marcus looked at his sons. Nathan had fallen asleep in his wheelchair, exhausted from the morning's exertion. Isaiah was examining his own fingers with an intensity he'd never shown before. And Micah. Micah was watching Marcus with those open, alive eyes. "Now I fight," Marcus said. Loretta smiled. "Now you fight." That night, Marcus called Dr. Harrison. "Dr. Harrison, it's Marcus Sterling." "Mr. Sterling, I was planning to call you tomorrow. My sons walked today." Silence on the other end. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" Nathan, Isaiah, and Micah. All three of them stood up from their wheelchairs and walked across the therapy room. More silence. Then, That's not possible. I have footage, time-stamped. You can come see it whenever you want." "Mr. Sterling, I've been reviewing our observation notes. The improvements we documented were significant, but walking wasn't in your statistical models. I know." Marcus kept his voice calm. "Come see for yourself. Tomorrow morning. Bring whoever you want." "I'll be there at 9. "Good." Marcus hung up and walked to the window. The garden below was dark, but he could make out the fountain in the center, the one that hadn't run since Diane died. He'd call someone about it tomorrow, get it running again. It was time for things to start flowing in this house. Dr. Harrison arrived at 8:30 alone this time. Marcus met him at the door. "You're early." "I couldn't sleep." The doctor looked older than he had a week ago, uncertainty etched into lines around his eyes. "Where are they?" "Therapy room. Loretta's getting them ready." They walked in silence. When they reached the door, Dr. Harrison hesitated. "Mr. Sterling, I want you to understand something." Marcus waited. "If what you described is accurate, it contradicts 30 years of my clinical experience. It challenges everything I've been taught about neurological development in severe CP cases." He met Marcus's eyes. "I'm not sure I'm prepared for that." "Neither was I," Marcus said. "But I've learned that being unprepared doesn't make something less true." He pushed open the door. Loretta stood in the center of the room, the 3 wheelchairs arranged around her in a semicircle. The boys were awake, alert, their eyes tracking as Marcus and Dr. Harrison entered. "Good morning, Dr. Harrison," Loretta said. The neurologist nodded stiffly. "Ms. Johnson, would you like to see what these boys can do?" Dr. Harrison glanced at Marcus, then back at Loretta. "Please." What happened next would replay in Marcus's memory for the rest of his life. Loretta knelt beside Nathan and took his hands. "You ready, sweetheart? Show Dr. Harrison what you showed me yesterday." Nathan's grip tightened on her fingers. His legs tensed beneath him, and then with effort that showed on every line of his small face, he pushed himself upward, standing. Dr. Harrison made a sound Marcus had never heard from him, something between a gasp and a choke. Isaiah went next, then Micah, 3 boys standing in a row, legs shaking but holding. "Come on, babies," Loretta whispered. "Show him." Nathan stepped forward first. 1 step, 2, 3. Isaiah followed. Then Micah. They crossed 5 feet of floor space and stopped in front of Dr. Harrison, who had gone completely pale. "This isn't—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Impossible," Marcus supplied. "Yeah, we've established that." Dr. Harrison sank into the nearest chair. His hands were trembling. "I've been wrong," he said quietly. "About everything." Loretta helped the boys back into their wheelchairs and approached the shaken doctor. "You weren't wrong," she said gently. "You were working with the information you had. The problem isn't doctors like you. The problem is believing that information is the same as truth." Dr. Harrison looked up at her. "What's the difference?" Loretta smiled. "Information tells you what usually happens. Truth tells you what's possible." The doctor sat in silence for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer, humbler. "I owe you an apology, Ms. Johnson. I tried to stop something I didn't understand." "Apology accepted." "And Mr. Sterling." He turned to Marcus. "I told you to temper your expectations. I told you your sons would never improve beyond baseline. I was—" He stopped, swallowed. "I was wrong." Marcus felt something release in his chest. Not anger, he'd let that go days ago. Just the last remnant of doubt that had been clinging to his heart. "What now?" Marcus asked. Dr. Harrison stood slowly. "Now I go back to my colleagues and tell them that 30 years of assumptions need to be reconsidered." He looked at the boys, really looked at them for the first time. "And then I figure out how to help other children like yours." He extended his hand to Loretta. "Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for showing me something I thought I'd never see." Loretta shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for being willing to see it." Dr. Harrison left 20 minutes later, promising to return with a revised treatment protocol. Marcus stood in the doorway and watched his car disappear down the driveway. "You did it," he said to Loretta. "We did it." She came to stand beside him. "You, me, and 3 little boys who refused to accept impossible." Marcus turned to look at her, this woman who had walked into his broken life and put it back together piece by piece. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me. Just keep being their father." She smiled. "That's all the thanks I need." Marcus nodded. and for the first time in 2 years, he felt like he knew exactly what that meant. The days after Dr. Harrison's visit changed the rhythm of the Sterling mansion. Marcus found himself waking earlier than ever, eager to reach the therapy room before Loretta arrived. He wanted those first moments with his sons, the quiet minutes when morning light filtered through the windows and the house still held its breath. "You're here early again?" Loretta said, walking in to find Marcus already seated between the wheelchairs, Nathan's hand in his. "Couldn't sleep." Good couldn't sleep, or bad couldn't sleep? Marcus considered the question. Different couldn't sleep. Like something inside me finally woke up and doesn't want to miss anything. Loretta smiled and set down her bag. "That's called being a father." "Is that what this is?" "That's exactly what it is." They worked together through the morning exercises, falling into a rhythm that had become as natural as breathing. Motor patterns with Micah, reaching exercises with Isaiah, balance work with Nathan. But something new had entered the room since the walking breakthrough. The boys were different, more alert, more engaged, more present. Their eyes tracked movement with sharper focus. Their responses came quicker. Even their breathing seemed stronger. "They know," Loretta said during a break. "Know what?" "That something changed, that they did something impossible." She watched the boys with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. "Children understand more than we give them credit for. They feel victories even when they can't name them." Marcus looked at his sons. Nathan was examining his own feet with intense concentration, as if seeing them for the first time. Isaiah had discovered that his fingers could grip the edge of his tray and was testing the sensation repeatedly. And Micah. Micah sat with his head held high, eyes open, watching everything. "Do you think they remember their mother?" Marcus asked quietly. Loretta's hand stilled on Isaiah's arm. "What makes you ask that?" "I wonder sometimes. If somewhere inside them they know she existed, know she loved them." He paused. "Know she died bringing them into the world." "Children remember love," Loretta said carefully. "Even if they can't picture the face that gave it. The feeling stays." "How do you know?" "Because Samuel remembered our grandmother. She died when he was 18 months old. But whenever I'd hum her songs, he'd calm down, like something in him recognized the melody, even though his mind couldn't hold the memory." Marcus thought about Diane's lullabies, the off-key singing she did every night while pregnant. The way she'd place her hands on her belly and talk to the boys like they could already understand. "Diane used to sing this song," he said. "I don't know all the words, something about sunshine and clouds. You are my sunshine." "Maybe. I can't remember." Loretta began to hum softly. A melody Marcus hadn't heard in 2 years floated through the room, simple, familiar, devastating. Nathan's head turned toward the sound. Marcus felt his throat close. "That's it. That's the one." Loretta kept humming. Isaiah's fingers stopped their exploration. Micah's eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made Marcus's heart ache. "They recognize it," Marcus whispered. "They remember her," Loretta said, "in whatever way their hearts can hold." Marcus reached out and took Nathan's hand. The small fingers curled around his thumb. "Your mama loved this song," he said, his voice thick. "She sang it to you every night, even before you were born." Nathan's grip tightened. "I'm going to learn it," Marcus continued. "All the words, and I'll sing it to you the way she did. It won't sound as good." He laughed through tears. "Actually, it'll probably sound better because your mama couldn't carry a tune, but it won't feel the same. Nothing feels the same without her." Loretta's humming faded into silence. The room held its breath. "But I'm here," Marcus said, "and I'm not going anywhere. Not ever again." He didn't know if Nathan understood the words, but he understood the feeling behind them. Marcus could see it in the way his son's body relaxed, the way his eyes softened, the way his breathing slowed into something that looked almost like peace. "That's what they need," Loretta said quietly. "Not perfect words, just presence. Just you." Marcus nodded, unable to speak. They sat there together, a father, a healer, and 3 children who were learning to hope while the morning light grew stronger around them. The second breakthrough came without warning. 3 days after Dr. Harrison's visit, Marcus was helping Loretta with Micah's afternoon exercises when she suddenly stopped moving. "Did you hear that?" Marcus froze. "Hear what?" "Shh, listen." Silence. Then so soft he almost misted a sound. "Ma." Marcus's blood ran cold. "What was that?" "Ma." The sound came again. From Micah. Loretta's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. "Micah?" she breathed. "Baby, did you just—" "Ma." Marcus fell backward onto the floor. His legs simply gave out beneath him. His son was speaking. His nonverbal, severely disabled son was making sounds that resembled words. "Ma." Micah said again, his eyes fixed on Loretta's face. "Ma." "He's calling you." Marcus said, his voice barely audible. "He's calling you, Ma." Loretta knelt beside Micah's wheelchair, tears streaming down her cheeks. "That's right, sweetheart. That's right. I hear you. I hear you." "Ma?" Micah's hand lifted from his lap, reaching toward her face. "Ma." Loretta gathered him into her arms and wept. Marcus sat on the floor watching, too overwhelmed to move. His son had spoken. Doctors had said the boys would likely never develop verbal communication. The brain damage was too extensive, the motor control too impaired. At best, they might learn to use communication devices as they grew older. But Micah was speaking. Not perfectly, not clearly, but intentionally. Deliberately. A sound directed at a specific person for a specific reason. "Ma." The word echoed through the room, through Marcus's heart, through everything he thought he knew about possibility and limitation. Nathan made a noise. Isaiah turned his head toward his brother. "You hear him?" Loretta said through tears, looking at the other 2 boys. "You hear your brother talking?" Nathan's mouth opened. His lips moved. No sound came out, but Marcus could see him trying. "Take your time," Loretta whispered. "There's no rush. You'll find your voice when you're ready." Marcus crawled across the floor until he was beside them. His hands were shaking as he reached for Nathan. "Hey, buddy, you trying to say something?" Nathan's lips moved again. His face contorted with effort. "Don't push," Loretta said gently. "Just let it come." Nathan's body tensed. His jaw worked. And then, "Da." Marcus stopped breathing. "Da." "That's right," he managed. "That's right. I'm Da. I'm your daddy." "Da." Nathan's hand reached toward Marcus's face, mimicking what Micah had done with Loretta. Tiny fingers touched his cheek. "Da." Marcus broke. Every wall, every barrier, every piece of armor he'd built since Diane died, it all crumbled in that single moment. He pulled Nathan from his wheelchair into his arms and wept. "I'm here," he sobbed. "I'm right here. Daddy's never leaving again." Isaiah watched his brothers with wide eyes. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "It's okay, sweetheart," Loretta said, moving to him. "You'll find your voice. We're not in a hurry." Isaiah's face scrunched with concentration. His lips moved. His throat worked. Nothing came. His eyes filled with tears of frustration. Hey, Loretta soothed. "Listen to me. Your brothers needed longer to walk than you did. Remember, you were first to take those steps. We all have our own timing." Isaiah looked at her, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Your voice is in there," Loretta continued. "I know it is, and when it's ready to come out, it will. Until then, I hear you anyway. I hear everything you're saying." She pulled him into her lap and held him while he cried. Marcus held Nathan, and Micah sat in his wheelchair watching his family, repeating the only word he knew. "Ma." Ma, ma. It was a symphony. Imperfect, incomplete, but more beautiful than anything Marcus had ever heard. That night, Marcus called his lawyer. James, I need you to do something for me. It's 11 o'clock, Marcus. Can this wait until morning? No, it can't. A sigh on the other end. What do you need? I want to set up a trust fund for Loretta Johnson. Silence. Your caregiver? Yes. Marcus, I have to advise against... I'm not asking for advice. I'm asking you to do it. James paused. How much are we talking? Marcus had spent the evening calculating. Everything Loretta had given up to be here, the job security she could have had elsewhere, the years of earning potential, the personal sacrifices she'd made. $5 million, Marcus said. Vested over 10 years or immediately if she leaves employment for any reason other than termination for cause. James whistled low. That's extremely generous. It's not enough, but it's a start. She knows about this. No, and I don't want her to. Not yet. Just set it up. Marcus, I've been your lawyer for 15 years. I've seen you make a lot of decisions. This might be the most emotional one. Maybe. Or maybe it's the first rational one I've made since Diane died. Another pause. I'll have the paperwork ready by end of week. Thank you, James. Marcus hung up and walked to his office window. The garden below was different now. The fountain was running for the first time in 2 years. He'd had it repaired the day after the boys walked. Water caught the moonlight, scattering silver across the dark lawn. He thought about Diane. What would she say if she could see this? She'd probably laugh. She'd always teased him about his inability to express emotion, his tendency to throw money at problems instead of engaging with them directly. You can't buy your way out of feeling things, Marcus, she'd say. At some point, you have to actually show up. Whoa. He was showing up now. Finally. 2 years too late, but finally. The trust fund wasn't about buying Loretta's loyalty or paying off a debt. It was about acknowledging that some gifts can't be repaid, only honored. Marcus turned away from the window and walked down the hallway toward the nursery. The door stood open now. He'd stopped closing it after that first night in the rocking chair. The room looked different in the darkness. Less like a memorial, more like a promise. He sat in Diane's chair and picked up the blanket that still smelled faintly of lavender. She saved them, he said into the quiet. This woman I tried to fire a dozen times, she saved our boys. The room answered with silence, but it was a warm silence, not the cold emptiness he'd grown accustomed to. I wish you could meet her. You'd love her. She's stubborn and faithful, and she doesn't take any of my crap. He laughed softly. Just like you. The blanket felt soft in his hands, familiar. I'm going to be okay, Marcus continued. The boys are going to be okay. It's not what we planned. None of this is what we planned, but it's going to be okay. He sat there until his eyes grew heavy, until the blanket warmed against his chest, until something that felt almost like peace settled over him. Tomorrow he would tell Loretta about the trust fund. Tomorrow he would face whatever came next. Tonight he would rest. The morning brought chaos of the best kind. Marcus arrived at the therapy room to find all 3 boys attempting to stand simultaneously, Loretta rushing between them like a shepherd with too many lambs. A little help here, she called when she saw him. Marcus ran to Nathan's side just as the boy's legs began to buckle. He caught him under the arms and steadied him. Whoa, buddy. Where do you think you're going? Da, Nathan said firmly. Da. Yeah, I'm here. But you can't just launch yourself out of the wheelchair without warning. He saw his brothers trying, Loretta explained, adjusting Isaiah's stance. Didn't want to be left out. Micah was already upright, wobbling, but determined. His eyes met Marcus's across the room. Ma, he said, then turned his head toward Marcus. Da. Marcus felt his heart expand. That's right, buddy. Ma and Da. We're both here. He's learning fast, Loretta said. Started combining sounds yesterday. Mada, Dama. He's figuring out that words mean things. What about Nathan and Isaiah? Nathan's got Da pretty solid. Isaiah's still working on it. She paused. But he said something else this morning. What? Loretta grinned. Bah. Brother. I think he's trying to say brother. Marcus looked at Isaiah, who was standing between his siblings, one hand on each of their wheelchairs for balance. Bah, Isaiah said, looking at Nathan. Then he turned to Micah. Bah. Marcus felt tears threatening again. He's naming them. He knows they're his brothers. He's always known. Now he can tell us. The morning session became a celebration. The boys practiced standing while Marcus and Loretta spotted them. They practiced sounds while their father repeated words back to them. They practiced reaching while Loretta placed toys at challenging distances. And through it all, the room filled with voices that had been silent for 2 years. Ma. Da. Ba. 3 words. 3 impossible words. 3 miracles wrapped in syllables. By noon, the boys were exhausted. Loretta settled them into their wheelchairs for a rest period while Marcus fetched water and snacks. When he returned, Loretta was standing by the window looking out at the fountain. You got it running, she said. Last week. Felt like it was time. Your wife's fountain. How did you know? Loretta turned to face him. You mentioned it once, when you were telling Nathan about the garden she wanted to plant. Marcus handed her a water bottle. I didn't think you were listening. I'm always listening, Mr. Sterling. It's part of the job. Marcus. Excuse me. Call me Marcus. I think we're past the formalities. Loretta considered this for a moment. Then she nodded. Marcus. It felt strange hearing his name in her voice. Strange but right. There's something I need to tell you, he said. Sounds serious. It is. He took a breath. I've set up a trust fund in your name. $5 million. Loretta's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. That's not necessary. I know it's not. I did it anyway. I told you from the beginning I'm not here for money. And I believe you. That's exactly why you deserve it. Marcus stepped closer. What you've done for my sons for me, it can't be repaid. I know that. But I can make sure you never have to worry about your future. You can stay here as long as you want, or you can leave tomorrow if something better comes along. The money is yours either way. Loretta was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick. No one's ever done anything like that for me. Then everyone you've ever helped has been a fool. She laughed a wet, surprised sound. You're something else, Marcus Sterling. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. She wiped her eyes. Thank you. I don't know what else to say. You don't have to say anything. Just keep doing what you're doing. He glanced back at the boys who were dozing peacefully in their wheelchairs. They need you. I need you. Loretta followed his gaze. They're going to be okay, you know. Really okay. Not just managing thriving. You really believe that? I know it. Same way I knew they could walk before they did. Same way I knew they could talk before they did. She looked at him. Some things you don't believe in. You just know. Marcus nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand the difference. Dr. Harrison returned at the end of the week with a revised treatment protocol, and something Marcus hadn't expected, an apology. I've been thinking about what happened here, the doctor said, sitting across from Marcus in the study. About what I witnessed. And I owe you more than I said before. You already apologized. For being wrong, not for being dismissive. Dr. Harrison shifted uncomfortably. When you first brought your sons to me, I gave you a prognosis based on statistics and precedent. What I should have given you was hope tempered by reality. You gave me what you believed was true. I gave you what was easy. There's a difference. The doctor leaned forward. Telling a parent their child will never walk, never talk, never improve, it's terrible news. But it's also definitive. It closes a door. And sometimes, closing doors is easier than admitting we don't know what's behind them. Marcus considered this. You couldn't have known what Loretta would accomplish. No, but I could have left a room for possibility. I could have said unlikely instead of never. I could have encouraged you to explore alternatives instead of accepting limitations. Dr. Harrison sighed. I've been a doctor for 30 years. Somewhere along the way, I stopped practicing medicine and started practicing certainty. Your sons reminded me that certainty is just another word for giving up. The words hung in the air between them. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now I go back to my practice and change how I talk to parents. Every parent who comes to me with a child like yours, I'm going to tell them about your boys. I'm going to tell them that impossible is just a word, not a verdict. That's a lot of change for one doctor. Maybe, but it's a start. Dr. Harrison stood and extended his hand. Thank you, Mr. Sterling, for pushing back, for fighting, for not accepting what I told you. Marcus shook his hand. Thank Loretta. She's the one who did the fighting. I intend to. But someone hired her. Someone kept her when every instinct probably said to let her go. The doctor smiled slightly. You fought too, even when you didn't know it. After Dr. Harrison left, Marcus walked to the therapy room. Loretta was sitting on the floor with the boys, a picture book open in her lap. She was pointing at images and making sounds encouraging the boys to repeat after her. Cat, she said, pointing. See-ya. Micah attempted. That's good, Cat. See-ya. Nathan leaned forward in his wheelchair, studying the picture intently. Nah, he said. Loretta looked up. You want to try Nathan? Nathan pointed at the picture. Nah. Close, Cat. Cat. Ta. Nah. Marcus laughed from the doorway. I think he's saying his own name. Loretta's eyes widened. Nathan? Are you saying Nathan? Nah, nah. He is. She clapped her hands. Nathan, you're saying your name? Nathan smiled a real proud smile and pointed at himself. Nah. Marcus crossed the room and knelt beside his son. That's right, buddy. Nathan. You're Nathan. Nah. And that's Isaiah. He pointed. I say, Nathan attempted, and that's Micah. Nathan turned to his youngest brother. His lips worked carefully. My. Micah looked up at the sound of his name. His eyes met Nathan's. Ma, Micah said. Then he pointed at his brother. Bah. That's right, Marcus said, his voice cracking. Brother. He's your brother. The three boys looked at each other. Really looked at each other for the first time Marcus could remember. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or connection. The kind of bond that forms between siblings who fought impossible odds together. Bah, Isaiah said, pointing at Nathan. Bah, Nathan echoed, pointing at Isaiah. Bah. Micah completed, pointing at both. Brothers. They knew the word now. They knew what it meant. Loretta reached out and took Marcus's hand. This is what I meant, she said quietly. When I said they'd thrive, this is what it looks like. Marcus watched his sons discovering each other, discovering language, discovering a world that had been closed to them for so long. Thank you, he whispered. You already thanked me. Not enough. Never enough. Loretta squeezed his hand and released it. Come on, she said. We've got work to do. And they did. The weeks that followed became the fullest of Marcus's life. He stopped going to his office entirely, delegating business operations to his executive team. His priorities had shifted. The company would survive without his daily attention. His sons wouldn't. Every morning he was in the therapy room before dawn. Every evening he stayed until the boys fell asleep. He learned Loretta's techniques, the motor patterns, the sensory exercises, the patient repetition that slowly rewired 3 damaged brains. And he talked. For hours he talked. He told them about their mother, about the day he met her, about their first date, about the proposal that went wrong when the ring fell through the boardwalk and he'd had to dive into the ocean to retrieve it. He told them about the pregnancy, about Diane's cravings for pickles and ice cream at 3 a.m, about the nursery she'd spent months designing, about the names they'd chosen together: Nathan for his grandfather, Isaiah for her favorite book, Micah for no reason at all, except that it sounded like music. He told them about the delivery, about holding Diane's hand while 3 tiny lives entered the world, about the 45 minutes he'd had with her afterward, precious, painful minutes he'd spent telling her how much he loved her, how proud he was, how everything was going to be okay. And he told them about his grief, about the 2 years he'd spent hiding, about the fear that had kept him from being the father they deserved. "I was wrong," he said one evening, sitting between their wheelchairs. "I was scared and broken, and I let that keep me from you. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving, not ever." The boys couldn't understand every word, but they understood the feeling. Nathan reached out and touched his face. "Da." Isaiah grabbed his hand. "Da." Micah leaned toward him from his wheelchair. "Da." 3 sons, 3 voices, 3 reasons to keep fighting. Marcus gathered them close and held them until the night grew dark around them. "I love you," he whispered. "All 3 of you, more than anything in this world." The boys settled against him, small bodies warm and trusting, and somewhere in the house, Loretta's voice drifted down the hallway. "Trouble don't last always." Marcus closed his eyes and let the words wash over him. She was right. Trouble didn't last always. Sometimes it ended. Sometimes it transformed into something else entirely. Sometimes it became the foundation for miracles. 6 months had passed since Loretta walked through the door of the Sterling mansion. Marcus stood at the window of the therapy room, watching his sons on the back lawn. Nathan was chasing a butterfly, his legs still unsteady, but moving with purpose. Isaiah sat in the grass, fingers exploring the texture of each blade with intense concentration. And Micah, the smallest, the one doctors had given the worst prognosis, was standing on his own face, turned toward the sun, arms spread wide, like he was trying to embrace the sky. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" Marcus turned. Loretta stood in the doorway, a knowing smile on her face. "Sometimes I think I'm dreaming," he admitted. Then Nathan falls and gets back up, and I remember dreams don't hurt. Speaking of which, Loretta nodded toward the window. Nathan had stumbled over a root. Marcus tensed, ready to run outside, but before he could move, Nathan pushed himself up from the ground, brushed off his knees, and resumed his chase. "He's getting stronger," Marcus said quietly. "They all are. Every day, a little more." Marcus watched his sons for another long moment. The garden had come alive in the past months. The fountain ran constantly now, its sound drifting through open windows. Diane's flower beds had been replanted not by hired gardeners, but by Marcus himself on his knees in the dirt, teaching his sons the names of roses and tulips. "I have something for you," he said, turning away from the window. Loretta raised an eyebrow. "Another trust fund. Something better." He walked to his desk and retrieved an envelope. "Open it." She took the envelope cautiously, as if expecting it to bite. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter typed on Sterling Industries letterhead. Loretta read silently. Her expression shifted from curiosity to confusion to something Marcus couldn't quite name. "This is a job offer," she said slowly. "It's more than that. It's a position. Director of the Sterling Foundation for Pediatric Neurological Development." Marcus stepped closer. "I've been working with my lawyers and a team of medical advisors. We're establishing a foundation dedicated to children with cerebral palsy and similar conditions. Research intervention programs, family support. Everything you've taught me about early intervention and neuroplasticity, we're going to make it available to families who can't afford private care." Loretta's hands were shaking. Marcus. The foundation will fund therapy programs in underserved communities. We'll train caregivers in your methods. We'll provide equipment and resources to families who've been told the same things I was told, that their children will never improve, that they should accept limitations, that hope is dangerous. This is... She couldn't finish. This is what you deserve. A platform to help thousands of children the way you helped my sons. Marcus took her hands in his. I can't give back what you've given me, but I can make sure your gift reaches beyond these walls. Loretta stared at the letter, tears streaming down her face. Samuel, she whispered. What? My brother. The one who died. She looked up at Marcus. I made a promise at his grave, that I'd fight for children like him, that I'd never let another child feel alone in their struggle. Her voice broke. This is bigger than anything I imagined. This is his legacy, Marcus said. Yours and his. Together. Loretta pulled him into an embrace so fierce it knocked the breath from his lungs. She held him like she was afraid he'd disappear, like the moment was too fragile to trust. Thank you, she sobbed. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Marcus held her back just as tightly. Thank you for not giving up. On my sons, on me. They stood there for a long time, two people who had been broken by grief and rebuilt by faith, holding each other in the room where impossible had become possible. When they finally separated, Loretta wiped her eyes and laughed. Well, she said, I guess I better accept this job before you change your mind. Too late. The paperwork's already filed. You were that confident, I'd say yes. Marcus smiled. I've learned a few things about faith. The foundation launch was scheduled for 3 months later. In the meantime, the Sterling household continued its transformation. The boys progressed faster than anyone expected, including Dr. Harrison, who visited monthly, now each time leaving with notes that contradicted everything he'd written before. Nathan's walking unassisted for periods of up to 10 minutes, he reported during one visit. Isaiah's fine motor skills have developed to the point where he can hold a crayon and make intentional marks. And Micah, he shook his head in wonder. Micah is speaking in 2-word phrases, consistently. Is that unusual? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. For children with this severity of diagnosis, it's unprecedented. Dr. Harrison looked at Loretta. I've been practicing medicine for 30 years. I've never seen anything like this. Neither have I, Loretta admitted. But I've always believed it was possible. That's the difference, isn't it? The doctor closed his notebook. Belief. Marcus thought about that conversation long after Dr. Harrison left. Belief. Such a simple word for something so powerful. He'd spent 2 years believing in limitations, believing in statistics, believing that the worst outcomes were the most likely, and his sons had stagnated. Then Loretta had walked through his door believing in possibility, believing in potential, believing in 3 small boys who couldn't speak or walk or do anything the world said they should be able to do, and his sons had flourished. The difference wasn't medical intervention. It wasn't expensive equipment or cutting-edge therapy. It was faith, pure, stubborn, relentless faith in what could be rather than what was. Marcus had learned that lesson the hard way. He was determined to pass it on. The week before the foundation launch, Marcus took his sons to the nursery. He'd been preparing for this moment for months. The room had been transformed, no longer a museum to grief, but a space alive with color and possibility. The pale yellow walls remained, and Diane's animal mural still danced across one side. But now there were toys scattered across the floor. Books stacked on shelves, 3 small beds arranged in a semicircle where the cribs used to stand. This was your mama's room, Marcus said, settling onto the floor with his sons around him. She designed it for you. Every color, every picture, every piece of furniture, she chose it because she wanted you to feel loved from the moment you opened your eyes." Nathan touched the wall, tracing the outline of an elephant with his finger. "Mama," he said softly. Marcus felt his heart catch. It was a word Nathan had learned recently, pieced together from the stories Marcus told every night. That's right, Mama. She painted that elephant herself. Took her 3 days because she kept changing her mind about the color. "Mama paint," Nathan said. "Yeah, buddy, Mama paint." Isaiah crawled toward the bookshelf, crawled because his legs were still tired from the morning's exercises. He pulled a book from the lowest shelf and held it up. "Read," he said. Marcus took the book and felt tears spring to his eyes. Charlotte's Web. The book Diane had chosen for their first family read aloud. The book he'd started and never finished. "Your mama wanted me to read this to you," he said, his voice thick. "I started it once, a long time ago, but I couldn't. I couldn't finish it without her." Micah crawled into his lap and settled against his chest. "Read Da." 3 small faces looked up at him. 3 pairs of eyes that held trust and expectation, and something that looked almost like permission. Marcus opened the book to page 1. "Where's Papa going with that axe?" He read, his voice unsteady at first, then growing stronger. "This is the story of a girl named Fern who loved a pig named Wilbur and a spider named Charlotte." He read for an hour, then 2. The boys drifted in and out of attention, sometimes watching his face, sometimes examining their own hands, sometimes dozing against him. But they stayed. They listened. And when Marcus reached the final pages, the part where Charlotte dies and Wilbur mourns his friend, he didn't stop. It is not often that someone comes along who is a true friend and a good writer. Charlotte was both. The words hung in the quiet room. "Mama," Nathan said softly. Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Yeah, buddy. Mama was a true friend too. The best I ever had." He closed the book and held his sons close. "I'm sorry it took me so long to finish it," he whispered. "But I think she understands. I think she's been waiting." The nursery felt different now. The grief was still there. It would always be there, but it had transformed into something softer. Something that felt less like drowning and more like floating. Marcus looked at the elephant on the wall, the one Diane had painted 3 times, because she couldn't decide on the perfect shade of gray. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For them. For everything." The room answered with silence. But it was a warm silence now. A peaceful silence. A loving silence. The foundation launch exceeded every expectation. Marcus had invited 200 guests, medical professionals, philanthropists, politicians, journalists. He'd prepared remarks about the mission, the programs, the vision for the future. But when he stepped to the podium and saw Loretta sitting in the front row with his sons on her lap, everything he'd planned to say dissolved. "I had a speech prepared," he began. "Statistics about cerebral palsy, research about neuroplasticity, stories about the families we hope to serve." He paused, looking at his sons. "But instead, I want to tell you about 3 boys who were told they would never walk, never talk, never be anything more than their diagnosis." The room went silent. 2.5 years ago, I lost my wife. She died 45 minutes after giving birth to triplets, Nathan, Isaiah, and Micah. And a few weeks later, doctors told me something that felt like losing her all over again. My sons had severe cerebral palsy, all 3 of them. The prognosis was... He swallowed hard. The prognosis was that they would never improve. He looked at Loretta. I believed them. For 2 years, I believed them. I hired caregivers to manage their limitations. I installed cameras to monitor their decline. I built walls around my heart because I couldn't bear to hope for something that would never come. Marcus stepped away from the podium and walked toward his sons. Then a woman named Loretta Johnson walked into my house. She wasn't a doctor. She wasn't a specialist. She was a caregiver who believed in something the rest of the world had given up on. He lifted Nathan from Loretta's lap and set him on the floor. "Nathan, can you show everyone what you can do?" The room held its breath. Nathan looked at his father, then at the crowd. For a moment, he seemed uncertain. Then he squared his small shoulders and took a step. Another. Another. He walked 10 feet across the stage, turned, and walked back. The room erupted. Marcus was already reaching for Isaiah. "Your turn, buddy." Isaiah walked more slowly, more carefully, but he walked. 12 steps to the end of the stage and back. The applause grew louder. Finally, Marcus lifted Micah. "You ready to show them?" Micah looked at the crowd with those bright, alive eyes. Then he opened his mouth. "I walk," he said clearly. The room gasped. Micah took his first step, then his second. By the time he reached his brothers at the other end of the stage, every person in the room was on their feet. Marcus gathered all 3 boys into his arms and turned to face the crowd. "These are the children doctors said would never walk. These are the children who spent 2 years in wheelchairs while their father watched through cameras too afraid to hope." He looked at Loretta, who was weeping openly. "And this is the woman who refused to accept impossible. This is the woman who saw 3 paralyzed children and said, 'Not on my watch.' This is the woman who reminded me that belief isn't just a feeling, it's a choice we make every single day." Marcus carried his sons back to the podium. "The Sterling Foundation exists because of what happened in my home. But it's not about my family. It's about every family out there who's been told to give up. Every parent who's been handed a prognosis like a death sentence. Every child who's been written off before they had a chance to show what they're capable of." He looked directly into the cameras he knew were broadcasting the event. "If you're watching this and you have a child with disabilities, don't give up. Don't accept impossible. Find your Loretta. Find someone who believes. Because miracles are real. I know because I'm holding 3 of them in my arms." The standing ovation lasted 7 minutes. That night, after the guests had gone and the caterers had cleaned up, Marcus sat in the garden with Loretta. The fountain sparkled in the moonlight. The boys were asleep upstairs, exhausted from their big day. The house was quiet in a way that no longer felt empty. "Hell of a day," Loretta said. "Hell of a year." She laughed softly. "That too." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the water play across the fountain's surface. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said eventually. "Always. That first day when you walked into my house, when I told you, no improvising, no bonding, no hope speeches." He turned to look at her. "Why did you stay? Any sane person would have walked out." Loretta considered the question for a long moment. "Because I saw you," she said finally. "Saw me. Not the billionaire. Not the control freak with the cameras and the rules. I saw a broken man who was terrified of losing anything else. A father who loved his sons so much that he'd rather hide from them than risk the pain of hoping." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I've seen that look before," Loretta continued. "In the mirror after Samuel died. That look of someone who's decided that feeling nothing is safer than feeling everything." She reached over and took his hand. "I couldn't save my brother, but I could save you. And by saving you, I could save your sons." "You did," Marcus whispered. "You saved all of us. We saved each other." Loretta squeezed his hand. "That's how it works. Nobody gets through this life alone. We find each other in the darkness, and we hold on until the light comes back." Marcus looked at the house behind them, the mansion he'd bought for Diane, the home he'd turned into a fortress, the place where impossible had finally died. "She would have loved you," he said. "Diane. She would have loved everything about you. I think I would have loved her too. You're a lot alike, actually. Stubborn, faithful, completely unwilling to accept no for an answer." Loretta laughed. "Sounds like someone else I know." "Yeah, well, I learned from the best." They sat together until the moon rose high overhead. Two people who had found each other in the wreckage of their separate griefs and built something new from the pieces. "What happens now?" Loretta asked eventually. Marcus thought about the foundation, the programs they would build, the families they would serve, the children they would fight for. "Now we do it again," he said. 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, until every parent who's been told to give up knows there's another option. That's a lot of work. Good thing I'm not doing it alone. Loretta smiled that warm, steady smile that had first broken through his defenses all those months ago. "No," she agreed. "You're not." The morning of the first anniversary of Loretta's arrival dawned bright and clear. Marcus woke to the sound of laughter drifting up from downstairs. He pulled on a robe and followed the noise to the kitchen, where he found a scene that would have been unimaginable 12 months ago. His 3 sons sat at the table eating breakfast, not in wheelchairs. On regular chairs, their legs dangling, their hands gripping spoons, their mouths full of scrambled eggs. Loretta stood at the stove flipping pancakes, singing one of her spirituals. "Joy cometh in the morning." Nathan looked up when Marcus entered. "Daddy." He said not "da" anymore, but "Daddy" clear as a bell. "Loretta making pancakes." "I see that, buddy." Isaiah held up his spoon, showing off a perfectly balanced bite of eggs. "Look, Daddy, I do it." "Great job, Isaiah." Micah banged his cup on the table. "More juice," he announced. "Please." Marcus stood in the doorway, taking it all in. His sons, his family. The impossible made real. Loretta caught his eye and smiled. "Morning, sleepyhead. Pancakes are almost ready." "I'm not hungry." "Liar. Sit down." Marcus laughed and took his place at the table, the head of the table where he'd stopped sitting after Diane died, where he'd finally returned 3 months ago. "So," Loretta said, setting a plate of pancakes in front of him. "Big day today." "Is it anniversary? 1 year since I walked through your door and you tried to scare me away?" "I did not try to scare you away." "No improvising, no bonding, no hope speeches." Loretta raised an eyebrow. "That's literally the opposite of trying to make someone feel welcome." "It was my process." "It was your wall. Fortunately, I'm good at climbing." Marcus looked at his sons, who were busy demolishing their breakfasts with the enthusiasm of children who had discovered that food was actually enjoyable. "Thank God you are." After breakfast, they took the boys outside. The garden had become their favorite place, Nathan chasing butterflies, Isaiah collecting rocks, Micah sitting in the grass with his face turned toward the sun. Marcus watched them with a feeling he'd almost forgotten how to name. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. "I have something for you," Loretta said, reaching into her pocket. "A gift, for the anniversary." She handed him a small photograph, worn at the edges, clearly carried for many years. Marcus looked at it. A young black boy smiled up at him from the picture, maybe 5 or 6 years old, sitting in a wheelchair, a woman's hand resting on his shoulder. "Samuel," Marcus said quietly. "On his 5th birthday. The last one he celebrated." Marcus studied the photograph. The boy had Loretta's eyes, that same steady warmth, that same quiet strength. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because he's part of this story too. He's why I became who I am. He's why I walked through your door and refused to leave." Loretta's voice was thick. "I want you to keep it. So you never forget that miracles don't just happen to the people who receive them. They start with the people who were lost along the way." Marcus held the photograph carefully, reverently. "I'll put it in the nursery," he said. "Next to Diane's picture, so the boys can know both of them." Loretta nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "He would have loved them," she whispered. "My brother. He would have loved your sons." "And they'll love him. I'll make sure of it. I'll tell them his story, all of it. How he struggled, how he fought, how he showed his sister what it meant to believe." Marcus pulled Loretta into an embrace. "Thank you," he said. "For Samuel. For you. For everything. She held him tight. Thank you for letting me in. Behind them, Nathan's voice rang out across the garden. Daddy, Loretta, look. They turned. Nathan stood at the edge of the lawn, pointing at something in the distance. Birds, he shouted, like you told us, Loretta Cardinals. 3 red birds sat in the branches of the old oak tree, their feathers brilliant against the green leaves. Isaiah ran to his brother's side, grabbing his arm for balance. I see them. Red birds. Micah toddled across the grass to join them, moving slowly but steadily, his arms outstretched for balance. Birds fly, he said, watching the cardinals take off into the sky. We walk. Marcus felt something break open in his chest, not pain this time, but wonder. Yeah, buddy, he called out. Birds fly, you walk. Someday we run, Nathan added. Someday you'll run, Marcus agreed. Someday you'll do everything. The 3 boys stood together at the edge of the garden watching the sky, 3 small figures who had defied every prediction, exceeded every expectation, proven that the word impossible was just a challenge waiting to be accepted. Marcus took Loretta's hand. Look at them, he said softly. I'm looking. 1 year ago, they were in wheelchairs, nonverbal, paralyzed, and now they're children, Loretta finished. Just children, playing in a garden, watching birds, living their lives. Is that enough? After everything, is that enough? Loretta turned to face him, her eyes bright with tears and joy. That's everything, Marcus. That's absolutely everything. The sun climbed higher over the Connecticut hills, painting the garden in shades of gold. In the distance, the Sterling mansion stood solid and enduring, no longer a fortress of grief, but a home filled with laughter and love, and the sounds of 3 small boys discovering the world. Marcus Sterling walked across the lawn to join his sons. He lifted Micah onto his shoulders, took Nathan's hand. Let Isaiah wrap small fingers around his wrist. Where to? He asked them. Everywhere, Nathan shouted. Everywhere sounds good. They walked together toward the fountain, where water sparkled in the morning light, 4 figures moving as one. A family rebuilt from ruins. A miracle written in footsteps on the grass. Behind them, Loretta watched from the garden's edge, Samuel's photograph pressed against her heart. Rest easy, baby brother, she whispered. Your work isn't done. It's just beginning. She wiped her eyes and smiled. Then she walked forward to join them, stepping into the light, taking her place in a family that had chosen to believe when belief seemed impossible. Because that's what faith does. It walks when doctors say you'll never stand. It speaks when the world says you'll never find your voice. It loves when grief says you'll never feel anything again. And it never ever gives up. Not on children, not on family, not on the fragile, stubborn, miraculous possibility that tomorrow can be different from today. Marcus Sterling had learned that lesson the hard way. Now he would spend the rest of his life passing it on. Because miracles don't ask for permission. They just need someone brave enough to believe they're possible.